Friends, welcome back to the show. Today, I have my incredible friend, Laura Silvera, is here to tell us not only about her memoir, but the journey of writing and penning an incredible memoir, especially one around grief and everything that comes along with it. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. You're, again, not just a friend, but like someone I really admire because this stuff is hard. And I know it's a little bright, but I will let's see here. This stuff is hard. Writing a memoir is hard. Ask me how I know. But when I met you, you were like going in the trenches. You were about to reveal something really deep and heavy. But I want to jump into that today. I want to tell the incredible people that watch this show a little bit about you and your story. So if you could just start a little bit, go back in time a little bit, tell us about Laura, where she grew up, and how you came to scribe to write your book, but ultimately how you finished it. And we'll get through that. But tell us a little bit about Laura.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. And thank you so much for having me on. This is, oh my gosh, such a fun conversation. Anytime I get to hang out with you, it's fun. So I am in California, not born here. I was born in Texas, lived a little in Missouri, and then raised primarily in California. Family of 4, me and my older brother. I don't know, usual upbringing, I guess, kind of a little cookie cutter, I guess, but met my husband after later in college, after college, got married right before I turned 30. And then, kind of where this story takes off, the piece that I wanted to write about was, kind of acknowledging the girl that I thought I was growing up, just going through the natural struggles of, what education to do and like kind of, what's just the next phase. And then this book talks about, when you realize you can't plan everything. And then how do you pivot from those really hard things that happen in life? So my husband and I, we were married for a while, having fun doing our own adventures together. And then we decided to settle down and have a family, and then, quickly realize it's not that easy you can decide, but it doesn't always happen. So we, this talks about through my miscarriage and then having my oldest son born and then losing him suddenly at daycare one day. And then, battling through that grief and realizing, maybe, questioning whether we were meant to have a, growing family or not, and, pushing through those things. And then, we did end up having our rainbows, which is kind of where the title of the book came from. And then I remember writing the book and thinking, it's going to be about the grief piece, which, you kind of think of as like the event or the trigger that makes, that kind of ultimately defines you as having to carry something really heavy. And it was kind of like, okay, after my son passed away, how I dealt with it, the end. But we all know that's, there's not an end. You just figure out how to carry it with you. So the book extends to then being pregnant with my younger 2, and then how that impacted, how I parent, and then how I am the Laura I am today. Which, there's glimmers of the Laura I was, for sure. Like there's the foundation, but then, I'm sure a lot of people can agree, grief changes you, or trauma changes you, and it molds you into, sometimes it's hard to say, but I think, a better person sometimes, which I think is, is kind of a rough thing, even to say it now, even though I believe it in my heart, that things can get beautiful again. So
I love that arc of your story. And, again, writing about really difficult things is therapeutic. It's a process. It's a thing. Life comes in the way. Distractions love deep thought. Like, right? And meaning like, oh, you're thinking about something really deep and meaningful, and like you're trying to work through this thing. Here's all the distractions in the world to prevent you from that. And I think that's the one huge thing I think we all battle as people who love to write memoir, or even like enjoying reading memoir. Your memoir was incredibly inspiring. I mean, like it's it not only shares the story of like the depth, the darkness, but like what kept you motivated to keep writing, even though you were writing about some really dark moments of grief. It's a very hard thing for people to do. What kept you motivated?
I think there was a turning point. I was doing some like personal coaching at the time. And she was actually the one who said, we were talking one day about like, oh, what would you like to do? And it was like, oh, I always had this, it was kind of brushed off like, oh, I have this silly idea of writing a book. And then it was like, why can't you? And then, so, she was poking at me about it. And the thing that really turned it for me, I already had like a blog and I loved writing, but it was just like more little like kind of snippets. And I think I was talking to her one day and I said, well, I don't know what people want to hear. And I was so concerned about how I was going to help other people through my own experience that she said, well, what if you're not writing it for other people? And I was like, what are you talking? Like, you put your book out there, you bind it up and you put, by so-and-so, and it's out there and your audience is other people. But in my case, she said, well, what if you're writing your book for Chase, my oldest son? She said, what if you're writing it for him? And immediately it was just like, you kind of go back into yourself and then like realize why you're writing it. So I think, that really kicked it off, because then if I, there's so many times, like you say, when you write a memoir and you share so much and it's raw, it's hard to get the raw things out, period. But then let alone like thinking I'm putting this raw thing out there for somebody I'll never see or meet, or I'm potentially opening myself up for criticism. And then I just kept thinking, well, if I'm writing it for Chase, like he has to love me. No matter what I say, I'm mom.
Yeah.
So it just kind of, it gave the freedom to just kind of be like, well, it is what it is. And he already knows, everything that I struggled through.
Right.
So it wasn't new news. It was just being able to put it in paper.
I love that so much. And like directing your energy and being intentional to writing to one person. I mean, that's like, I think, the key to good memoir, because then you're right. You disassociate with all the people and how they're going to react and if it's worth it and if it's worthy and all the, not that those feelings don't come up, but that's the golden key. The thread is like when those feelings come up, you remind yourself, or someone gets to remind you, or your coach or whoever, your editor says, no, let's go back to Chase. Like just write it to Chase. And all of a sudden that pressure weighs off. All of a sudden the things that you've told those stories, but you've never told them to this depth, right? You've said these things before, but he doesn't, or she doesn't know where they come from, right? Like, so for me, it was my nephew. That clarity came from the workshop. And because at first I thought, I was like, oh, I'm writing, my refugee story so that like teachers can, use my story, because there's like this kids in the back that are immigrants and refugees who they can like help through, and it was like, that was too extensive. Exactly. It was too extensive. So digging a little bit deeper, I'm like, you know what? Honestly, if like my nephew read this and they saw who their grandfather was in this beautiful light and like what he did and how we got to come to America and like the depth of that story, I don't want it to be lost and like mistranslated generations down the line. So if my nephew and my nieces can read it and like know where they're from and know how they got here, I think it would really add a lot of value to their life. They would feel maybe a sense of appreciation for it. And that's exactly what I just kept my nephew like dead center, and it helped alleviate all the other stuff and all those voices. So I love that. I love that you and I can connect on that, because writing for that one person is literally a golden key in writing memoir, and really in writing in general, but memoir, especially when they're family, there's depth to that.
There is. And I think too, there's so many things out there, like for people that want to write or tell their story and everything. And I think there's a lot of, like before the book came to fruition and I was just writing to kind of get little pieces out and I had the blog up, you go to any, like start your blog and the first, like, it's like lesson 1, who's your avatar? And I mean, I would stop there and I'd be like, oh, crap, I don't know. because it's like there's this pressure.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah, like her name is Emily. She has curly hair. She's a third grade teacher. Like I was feeling so much pressure. I was like, maybe I should cut out somebody from a magazine and do a vision board. I was like all over. I had to like get this stranger right. And
Yes.
I think it can work to an extent, but I feel like that's the product will eventually be that for somebody. You don't have to force that. And so, yeah, being centered in your nephew, your son, your like, who's that person that's sitting next to you all the time or that you're thinking about, like, that's your person, if you want to call it your avatar or whatever, kind of put those, release the expectation.
Ah, so powerful. Yeah, because it makes it real. Because what you're writing about is real. I can see how, like, if you're writing some fictional stuff or even nonfiction, business advice or whatever, you can kind of picture an entrepreneur, you can picture like the insurance, whatever, whoever it is that you're kind of thinking about, and you can kind of make them up and in a way have a conglomeration of like different people in one, and that makes a little bit more sense. But yeah,
Sure.
I think with memoir, because you're just sharing such personal, deep stuff, that it just makes sense to share it with someone and that person isn't, like you said, like isn't judging you, isn't, and even if they do, they're just gonna find out more. Like, and it's like it's not a bad thing. And like you said, like I'm mom. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, you can't disown me. I'm your mom. Like, yeah.
So true.
But with that, I wanted to share, like, can you tell us a little bit, like, what role does your community, your family, other support systems, how did they play a role in helping you push through the challenges of writing and completing your memoir? I know you shared a little story about your husband with your podcast thing, but I know there's more to that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think for my parents, it was like I was taking time off work and then, who was going to watch the kids to, fly to Texas to do the workshop. And, it seems almost, because it's not written yet, it's almost like it's self-indulgent because it's still in theory and you're not actually like, oh, this is going to be like a piece of work that like is put out there and stuff. It's still hard to kind of imagine it. So I think a lot of times it's like, oh, well, that's not going to, like when we signed up and it was like, pick your window. And it was like, it was only offered twice a year or something. And so it's like, you look and it's like, oh, there's availability in the next window. And I was looking and it's like, that's 4 weeks away. Oh, I'm not 4 weeks away ready. And so my family reached out and it was like, you are, like, we can be there to help with the kids. And this is how we're going to answer X, Y, and Z. And then it was like, it kind of removed that excuse for me. So that was really helpful. Just cheering on when it was like, oh, I think I'm going to write the book. My best friend was really supportive. I'm part of a mom's group where we've all lost a child, and I talk about them in the book. And, I think, their encouragement was just like, they knew I needed it and they understood where I was coming from and knew that putting it into writing, I think, was, a way to help the community in getting my story out. The writing community, like what is Rising Authors now? And, after the books come out and seeing like the use of LinkedIn, the Laura before was like, oh, I'll set up my LinkedIn profile. And this was my, I'm in treasury and I was working for this mortgage company and now I'm with this company. And then to be in a world with creatives is just, the support there is like, it's fun as heck. It's just kind of like all the things to kind of like let down your guard and really talk about the things that, you may not talk about all the time. Posting about my book on LinkedIn was like, I never thought I'd do that until I got towards the end and realizing that community, like seeing now, somebody, an executive at the company I work for, since I posted that was a community that I actually didn't know was going to be there for me with the book. It was more on the tail end, but it's like she took a picture of my book on her coffee table and it was just like, And she's been at the company for so long. So it was like, you were part of my crew before I even knew it. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
the love continues and stuff. But I feel like
Yeah.
it was really big, and being with other authors that, are working through it and cheering each other on was huge, because there may not be, somebody who's writing the same book. You have the support of your family and the people that know about what you're writing about. But I also think, like with a memoir, it's like they have their own connection to your story, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Like, me writing as a mom is different on how grandma would look at it and what happened
Sure.
versus, so they're supportive in the sense that we all loved the same cute little guy, but then there were other support pieces that, supporting me as the coworker, supporting me as the writer, was huge.
Mm,
And then the family
yeah.
support. So I think you kind of have to come at it from all angles, which also increases your vulnerability tremendously.
Mm,
But I think as you start writing, you kind of that muscle is being flexed a lot, and you start to want to share it.
yeah. So powerful. I love
Yeah.
that. I think there's like the power in writing it, and then there's the power of the community, the people around you. And it's kind of like, just as much as you want to do it for yourself and as much as you want to do it for Chase or like my nephew in my case or whatever, you also want to do it for those who are cheering you on. Since you let them know that you were working on it, they're going to ask you, are you working on it? Where are you in the process? Whatever. That like kind of like that voice that kind of that adds fuel to your fire, right? It adds that belief in something, that like they want to hold on to this thing and they believe in you, and it makes it important. It makes it bigger than you realize. Even again, even if it's just a handful of people around you, and they are kind of randomly asking about it at any given point throughout the year or month or whatever, it keeps you motivated, it keeps you inspired, it keeps you feeling like, okay, yeah, this is worth it, this is worthy. And my story, again, yes, it's for me, it's for this person that I'm writing for, but also these other people are going to benefit from it, right? And that's so powerful, man. I when I was going through mine, it was predominantly of course my wife, but also there was a lot of people around me who knew me for long, like high school friends, the college friends, all
Mhm.
that stuff, who knew me and like knew my refugee story, but didn't know the depth of it, right? Because I never really, you don't just sit around with your high school buddies and like go deep into the trenches of like your story and like, all this stuff. But yeah, getting them to support and always ask, what's up? What chapter are you on now? Man, I can't wait for this thing. Come on, get it done. That kind of vibe always helped me channel that energy into it. Like, okay, yeah, good. Okay. People are anticipating this and posting about it, or I'm on chapter 13. It's coming. I promise, like, just give me a minute. I'm working on the cover. Like, hang on. But that was always so great, because those were the first people, like you said, that kind of, and sometimes there was a lot of people that I didn't even know. They were like spouses of the people that I knew or whatever.
Right?
And yeah, they reach out to you and they're just like, yeah, sending you pictures. They're at the airport or that thing, like, oh my God, I just finished this. And like, I literally gave it to the person sitting next to me at the airport because they like loved your cover. And I was like, you have to read this. And I just gave it to them. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. Like, the stories that come out of it is so empowering. But I know, memoir, again, back to this idea of like, how do we overcome these things? Like, I know you experienced this, but did you experience moments of doubt about sharing your story openly? And how did you overcome those moments of doubt? Because I know I felt it. I know other people do. What did you do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I feel like, I mean, anybody who's sitting on like the idea of a book, you've been sitting on a huge mountain of self-doubt for like years, decades. And like, who would want to read that? I mean, just all the thoughts. So making the decision to write it is huge. And then, yeah, to keep yourself going. Um, I think it's more like, you know, um, I think it's checking in and being on, like, if you're going to be honest about what you're writing, then I think for those around you that are supporting you, you have to be honest with them. So like if I wrote something that I'm so sorry. I'm smelling a really big whiff of smoke.
Oh no. Do you want to take
I
a
know.
moment to pause? It's
Yeah,
okay.
sorry. Can you
No,
hold on
pause
one
it.
second?
It's okay.
Yeah, I think it's being honest about all, like, with all of those people that are your support group, to keep yourself going in those moments of doubt, because you've already made the decision. So like in the mornings, that was when I loved writing. And so I would wake up and I liked being quiet because it allowed me to just kind of be vulnerable with myself. So I would finish writing and I would have to be done by like, I don't know, 6:30 a.m. for the day and then kind of move on. But on times when it was like a really rough day of writing, I would like go into the bedroom. My husband's waking up and he's looking over at me and I've already got like tears and like ugly snot, like things that happened already that shouldn't probably that early in the morning. And he's just looking at me and he's like, "Do you need a hug?" I was like, "Yes, I do." So it's just, and then, he'd be trying to get ready and I'd already been flooded with, what I was writing. So talking through it with him, plus he was, for Marcus, he's such a huge part of the story. So, checking in with him, what he was comfortable with me sharing versus not, because he was going to end up in the book anyway. And I don't know, writing yours, how you felt about that, because you're going to integrate all these people that are supporting you, or
Yeah.
some of them at least. And it's like, how do you do it in I didn't think anybody would say like, no, don't write that or something. But I always wanted to say like, hey, this part, this day that I'm writing about was particularly tough. And like
Yeah.
Marcus was with me in the house that day. So like I wasn't gonna leave him out of how I was doing, but then like how I saw him in that moment or something. So it brought him in. So I think open communication on so many levels, with the people that are
Yeah.
supporting you and keeping going. And I also had, um, Nicole from Copper Mountain helped me through, getting through my book and, soup to nuts to get it over the finish line. And I'm so grateful for her. The overthinking that occurs, that sounding board of the person that's not completely connected to your story, on the other end, and from a professional opinion, when you're telling stories, I would be so worried about the content of the story, or maybe somebody who's I'm not as close to being in the story, not in like saying their name or anything like that, but it would be a roadblock. And she would be there to say like, is it going to help your reader? Like, is what you're writing about something that's true to your story and was meaningful in your journey with grief and what you're trying to tell people, like the hardships? Is it more evidence of that? Does it add something? And if I was the resounding yes, then it almost gave me the sounding board to say that it was okay. It wasn't only okay that it's okay that I was doubting it, but it was also confirmation that I needed to keep writing it. And so that was
Yeah.
another like nudge to keep going. So I think,
So
um,
powerful.
yeah, that was really helpful. I don't know.
I love that.
Did you pause
Yeah.
when you're writing, bringing people into your stories? Like, it's nerve wracking.
Totally. I mean, and there was, I mean, I have 6 siblings. So like and like they each have a component to the story. And of course my mom and dad. Dad, I was very much reflective of because he had passed, but my mom, just kind of sitting with her sometimes and like talking about stories and like remind me of like how that went down, and like remind me of, and even my oldest brother, he was a big portion of like how we ended up being in that refugee camp. And so just kind of revisiting some of those stories. But like you, in the mornings, like I told my wife to push me out of bed at like 5 a.m. so that I can write, because I needed to write in the morning, get it out of the way. And then the way I processed my emotions was to go for a run. So this was
Mm.
like 2020. So everything was shut down anyway, which was kind of worked out. And I was like, all right, I'm going to really use this time to like finish the story and write my book. But I'm also going to like, I kind of started running a little bit, and but I started using running exercise to like process my emotions. And then I would come back and like we would just have like a little breakfast together or something, and then I would share about, because then I was able to kind of run, think through what I wrote, and like digest it a little bit, and then like have my wife to kind of reflect on. I'm like, it's crazy, this one part, da 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 da. And she's like, oh wow, like, and she would just like help me through it, give me a hug. Sometimes I didn't want to talk about it at all. Sometimes she did
Yeah.
find me crying, seriously. And so I totally relate to that. Like, and there's something magical about writing in the morning. I think it's Rumi who says that, like, um, I forget the quote, but it's something around like writing in the morning is like your spiritual connection, right? It's that moment of time where you are really connected to something higher than you. And I felt that, and I love that. And I am excited to, I haven't gotten really back into my second book yet, but because I've been building a business and a community and got laid
You've been a
off and
little
all the
busy.
things. So 5 in the mornings have been pretty busy. But I'm hoping that in the new year, I promised myself in the new year that I make that time back for reconnecting to that spiritual space, and like, really bring my father and more stories into what I want to write about next, and what I've been writing about, but just kind of off and on. But yeah, totally. That time in the morning where you can kind of flush through your ideas and connect to something higher, and then having someone to kind of reflect on those things with and get the hugs and get the love, that's huge. And then having a coach, having somebody outside of that circle who has no idea who you are, kind of in a way,
Yeah.
that can be the soundboard, that can sort of see the structure in your story and kind of help navigate that, as opposed to just someone that can, like, you can sob through it with, so that's really powerful. But yeah, like, totally, I feel like anyone who's writing a memoir, man, you need a team. You need a solid team around you. Whether you actually pay them, or they're just like there because they're like a part of your crew, your
Right?
entourage. But you need
Yeah,
that. Yeah, very much so. Very
you
much so.
totally do.
So looking back on your journey, what was the
Mhm.
most rewarding aspect of completing your memoir? How did it change you both as a writer and as a person?
Oh my gosh. You know what? The first thing that comes to mind, like we've been talking about, like through the writing process, the tears will come. And it's owning, well, there were a few moments actually, now that I think about it. Showing emotion, I think, I don't want to speak, I think humans have a hard time doing that in general. And um when at the workshop, the exercise to essentially get us to cry, I guess. But I
Yeah,
aced that
my
assignment.
favorite.
Let me tell you. I think I was like the second person to stand up, and it was like, "Who are you?" I think one of the questions was, "Who are you writing for?" and
Yeah.
"Who or why?" Um,
Mhm.
and like the premise or whatever it was. I mean,
Yeah.
I got through like maybe "Hi, my name is Laura," and then it was like sobs. I was like this hyperventilating little kid that like just fell off her scooter. I could not compose
Yeah.
myself. And at
Yeah.
we kept going around the room, and there was another person that said, he got emotional and he thanked me for it. And then we like took a lunch break, and there was somebody who we just passed by each other, and he was writing like a business book or something. And he just stopped me, and he's very, like tall and, just kind of I don't know if assertive is the, it was just kind of like, I didn't think I would have touched him that way. That sounded weird, but you know what I mean? And
No,
he just,
like emotionally, yeah.
yes. And he like had this straight face and he just looked at me and he said, "Don't ever apologize for crying." And like that
remember
stuck
that.
with me. Oh my gosh.
I was
I
there.
think about stalking him on Instagram and being like, I remember when you told me. And I think going back to your question, that started the process of me not being apologetic for crying. Like all of those moments where I cried and it was received in a way like, I get it. This is such an important thing for you to write about. Like, it's not only okay, it's necessary sometimes, and you shouldn't feel bad for it. So, the person I am now, sure, there are still times where I'm like, oh, get it together, Laura. Like, this is not the time to cry. And I don't want to paint a picture of myself that I'm crying all the time, but like, when it needs to happen and when I feel that it's okay, I'm changed and that I'm not apologetic for it. Like I don't think, we're all find ourselves in spaces where you're like, oh, I don't want to seem weak. I don't want to da da da. And sure, there's times when, you give yourself a slap in the face and you're like, I'm a rock star and you plow through. But then sometimes there's moments where the crying's going to come and you just got to embrace it. And so I'm not apologetic for it anymore. And like I loved those moments when I needed to do it when I was writing, and it produced something that I'm so proud of. So I'm just going to like keep riding that train. So I don't know. I encourage people to just keep telling myself that I think that's the biggest thing is like, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe I'm proud that I'm a crier or something in a way.
Yeah.
I
No,
don't think that's a skill that a lot of people, I don't know, have, but
that's
I think I've
incredible.
definitely, and I think I was always an honest person, but I think writing a memoir makes you embrace honesty more. When you go through trauma or, grief or those kind of things, you are gifted with a huge amount of empathy. And I think it makes you, I think you have a leg up on a lot of people. And that is definitely a superpower. So I just think it's, it strengthens it and something to be proud of. And those are all just amazing, positive things that come out of writing a memoir that I think are pretty awesome. And you see it not only like I feel good with myself because of those things have come out, but you get validation from people who read it that are so appreciative and they share their things. And then that like the tears and the vulnerability and all that are like definitely all for naught. And that's when it starts to be like, okay, I wrote to chase, but then it turns external. And then I just think it's the gift that keeps giving. So I'm grateful for those things.
Yeah, well said. I love that. First of all, I remember when you were in the court, like in Austin, and we were going through all those exercises, and you helped really crack open the rest of the community in the class, right? It was like, okay, it's okay to go to this space. It's okay to go to this depth. That's what we're all here to do. And in order to release the tension, we have to allow our emotions to come through. So if it's laughter, it's laughter. If it's sadness, it's sadness. If it's crying, if it's anger, it's like, this is where the tension breaks, right? Is like, and in that breaking moment is where the real writing happens, right? Is where the real stuff starts to come out. And I think the tension release is not necessarily of like, sometimes, and a lot of it comes through tears, right? But tears, I think, I remember my father telling me that, like, holding back your smile while trying to laugh is damn near impossible. You know what I mean? Like
I
try,
just thought
like
about
you can't
trying to
do
do
it.
it.
Yeah, like you can't do it. So are tears when you're trying to. They're hard to hold back because you're trying to pull back the emotion, of, again, you can cry when you're laughing, you can cry when, you're feeling sad, you can cry when you're feeling anger, you can cry, right? Because it's the smiling part of these other emotions that is expressed through tears. And tears are a beautiful thing. We should embrace them. And in our Western culture, there's a weird vibe around it. And I grew up Middle Eastern, so if I had to cry, I cried. Like, I've seen my dad cry, I've seen, like, men, it's okay. Like, but that whole philosophy of just like, holding it back does nothing, but it's like holding back this reservoir. It's like, why? Release it, let it out. And then that's how you process it. It's like, it's the thing that needs to come out of you to express itself. And it's like, in that scenario, this is actually healthy. Now it's taking the honey and putting it on the wound that now starts to heal, and now we don't write from a scar, we're writing from a wound that's healing. And that's a different feeling. It's a I think when I finished my memoir, and I told this to Emily in our first podcast, I told her, I was like, I didn't care anymore. I didn't care to like speak. I didn't care. I was just telling you, like, I didn't care to go on podcasts. I was like, I finally saw myself. I for a long time, I was this little Arab kid who was going through all these things, and like, I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. I didn't even really speak that much when I was young, and all these things. But now, that urge to want to be seen, want to be heard, that almost like silent screaming, if you will, to the world, is now reversed. It's like, I don't need to scream. My silence is my power. Like, my knowing my essence, knowing my belief, knowing my story is the most powerful thing. And it all actually, my dad used to say this all the time. He said, the highest form of intelligence is not a Harvard degree, is not a whatever, it's empathy. Right?
Yes.
When you have all the intelligence, which means you have all the power, all the resources, everything, what do you then do with it? Empathy is to love and give it and share it, and like make people, people who are angry towards each other, like become the mold in the middle that brings them together. And like, that's the power of empathy. And that's the truest power of leadership, is that when you can rise and feel people through silence, right? And like you said earlier, like, and I didn't, man, at one point I called one of my friends. I was like, dude, I feel everything. I feel bad for the homeless, but I need to go to therapy to like not feel. He's like, what?
It's like,
he's like,
it's like
the opposite of what people go to therapy for. It's like, and I didn't understand the power. It's like, literally, you don't know it until you write through it and you feel through it, and then you express it, and then you realize, wow, I am sitting on a gold mountain that I can use to do all these things with. It's a very, very powerful energy. And I knew that you would get there from that moment when I saw you like go through that. And I knew the end result is always realizing that you have been sitting on a mountain of treasure, as far as like, your emotions are not the things that you apologize for anymore, but they are the things that embrace you, and like, you embrace them. And it's such a beautiful thing. So I love that.
It is. It's so awesome. I have to tell you, I was in a work call, and there must have been maybe like 10 of us on the call. And this was, I think I was towards the tail end of getting the book out. And I don't know if it was because I was in the writing process and was really starting to embrace it. But I think like, once you're on the empathy train, it's like, you can't hold back. So I was on this call, and it was like I said, I'm in treasury and banking partners, and there were IT folks, and it was a really long project at work. And so we'd have been having these weekly calls all the time. Well, the guy who was hosting the call was out the prior week or something. And then come to find out that his father had passed away. So I don't know how many people knew this, but I knew at least a few of us knew this. So the next week, part of me feeling empathy was like, please don't be on. Please don't, like, I hope you're giving yourself time. But of course he was on, because corporate America. So he was on the call, and then there was kind of like this awkward, like, oh, sorry, I wasn't there last week. And like, what do I need to, he's trying to kind of acclimate. And it was like, nobody was helping him out. Everybody's just like silent. And I was like, I don't think he wants to talk about an Excel spreadsheet right now, but he's here. So I'm going to be the awkward person. And I just said his name. And then I just said, we're so sorry for your loss. And then I didn't want to leave him hanging, but it was like, so sorry for your loss. And I just want to say that we're so glad to have you back. Like I kind of wanted to help get him, I wasn't trying to lead him into like, let's see how long we can make him cry. But I just, the acknowledgement, and, he was fighting it back. Like you said, we can, you can hear it when you're trying to fight back some tears, but he appreciated it. And I think with the empathy too, it's like, you're constantly it's going to evolve and get stronger, because even after Chase passed away, I said, like, I'm not going to, I made like a vow to myself, like, I'm not going to be the person that doesn't say anything, because grief is awkward. I'm going to say it. And there's been several times when it's like, now you have this like new thing going on and you're so proud of yourself. And there's been a couple of times when I've tried to acknowledge somebody's loss. I have acknowledged it. And, you don't know a dynamic when somebody loses somebody else or something. So I've definitely been received back with, like, they don't want to talk about it, and everybody grieves differently. But I think, that's my whole spiel on empathy, is like, you got to spread it out there, and then, you've done your part. Like it's a gift. You did your part. And if they needed it, they needed it. If they didn't, they're not going to feel left hanging, and you're not going to regret not saying something. So I definitely think that's my last thing on empathy.
No, that's so beautiful. Like, it is a gift, and it's an infinite gift that we get to share. And your sort of coming into those powers, right, is understanding there's a filter that sort of starts to come to life that other people don't necessarily have yet, right? That now you see through this filter, and you can feel people's emotions and things even before they say anything, and you can act on that. And the acting is a gift. You don't have to, you get to. And that's the privilege that we get to have as people who have gone through things. Different people go through different things, because that becomes their filter, right? You lost a kiddo, I lost a father, someone loses a mother, and that becomes their power of like how to help someone else with it. And that's the gift, that interconnects all of us and strengthens our bond as humans. And I just love that. And okay, so lastly, for those who are hesitant to start writing their own stories, what words of encouragement would you offer to help them take their first step?
Oh gosh. It's like there's so many. I feel like internally, well, like your question says, what's the steps? It's like internally, you already know you want to write it. Whether you've admit, like, say it out loud if you need to, but like if you're listening to your podcast, right? Or you're like, whether or not you've said it out loud, you're taking the steps that you want to do it. Like, it needs to be done. I guess I should say it that way. Like, at some point you get to a stage and you're like, I can't not. Like, it's this, screaming so loud. So I think it's giving yourself grace to like recognize that feeling, and then starting that train to tell somebody. And, Rising Authors is a great, you've got every sort of resource there to do it. And everybody that's willing to help and cheer you on. So finding, you go from, if you have your story, telling your immediate support group, giving yourself grace to know it's going to be hard emotionally. And then connecting with the, rising authors and the creative community, to just understand the logistics. I think there's that scary, it's like, it's all in theory. And there's so many people, even after I wrote mine, it's like, oh, I want to write mine. I've always thought about writing a book, and it's going to stay a thought. And like, if you're a planner, it's like, what's my budget? What could I do this in? Like, what's a timeline? Like, reach out to just like start troubleshooting those things, get the feel for that piece. It's the thing that took me from the LinkedIn treasury community to, loving to swim with the creatives and like know that world and, feel like I picked the wrong career path. Just kidding. Kind of. And
it's never too late. It's never too late to transfer.
Yeah,
So just FYI.
But I think, demystifying that piece is really helpful, and knowing, like, I don't know if people are going to take it from me. It really wasn't as hard as I thought. Like, when I was getting the personal coaching, she happened to have the recommendation because somebody else she was talking to had written their book with Scribe. So literally it was like, she handed that to me, like, here's the link and here's the resource that's like putting it in a bow. And like, that's all it took to be like, oh, this is, I'm there. Like, this is all I need to do to just, start it. And then, letting people guide me through it. Like that first day in the workshop, it's kind of that same thing. It was like the emotional share to like kind of break it down and realize, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to share. I want to share. And then we started getting into, once that's broken down, oh, there's actually an outline there. And then, talking through it and then getting, even more and more excited about it. And pretty soon then it's like the words start to flow. And then, you're in that space for quite a while. And then more of the logistics take over. But that's like towards the end. And then you can look back and be like, I did it. It's an amazing, I know we had that chart with like the, the roller coaster and everything like that. And it's like, it's so true, but it's doable, and it's so wonderful when it's done.
Proud of you, friend. You did it, and you
so
did it well. Amazing book called Wishing on Rainbows, a memoir. Laura, it's been so nice just hang out with you today, but also watch your journey. I literally was there from day one all the way till the finish line. And I'm so grateful because it's just been really cool to see you push through the dark times, the good times, the ugly times. And you did it with grace. You did it with asking for help. You did it with seeking resources, seeking help. That was amazing. And writing memoir is no easy thing, but I love that you kept your community around you, and that became a way forward for you. And I just admire you for that. So for anyone out there who wants to start writing a book, especially a memoir or writing their story, I promise you, you are worthy. It's worth it. The journey of itself will develop you and your story so much more than you can ever imagine. For me personally, it's opened up more doors than I can ever comprehend. And it's connected me with people like Laura and all these amazing other people that I get to interview and talk with and learn from and grow with. What's life all about? It's about connecting with other human beings so we can know ourselves. And so I'm so grateful I get to be a part of so many people's journeys, especially yours, Laura. And I know this won't be the last time. Hopefully I'll be in California in my van and we can do it in person and talk about book number 2. Yeah, I can't wait. Again, Laura, thank you so much for coming on the Rising Author Experience. I appreciate you so much, friend. We'll be in touch soon, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Hussein.